Let's get into the match right now, and then we'll talk about a little bit of the nuances of this matchup, the implications of Ruby Storm, perhaps with the ban list, and then just the match itself. So let's go ahead and start with the matchup. How do you feel about this mirror match? Is it one that is particularly skill testing?
I would say it's not that skill testing. I think winning the die roll is the number one thing you can do to increase your odds. Number two thing is kind of what Kanister just did and put a gemstone caverns into play, so that you steal back the play basically. Yeah, and and there's not that much interaction, so you tend to see players trying to go off as quickly as possible, be that on turn 2 or turn 3. Uh, at the last Pro Tour, I actually played Ruby Storm myself and played a mirror match where basically we played both games. We both attempted to go off on turn 2. Um, my opponent was on the play and failed, and then I was on the draw and succeeded to go off on turn 2. And then next game, I failed to go off on turn 2, but left it enough so that my opponent couldn't go off on their turn 2, and I went off on turn 3. So we're looking. Usually, it's a pretty quick sequence of things.
All right, well, let's see it here. It kind of reminds me of that line from like Pokemon Coliseum where it's like sparks are flying or something like that. I don't know if you know, you know what I mean? And that's kind of interesting. I am under the impression that this Ruby Storm deck is not very good, right? Like it was very easy to hate out at the Pro Tour, and that sort of hate persisted throughout the next few months. I will say shout out to I forget the player on Magic Online who has just been constantly crushing with Ruby Storm. His name starts with an X. Maybe someone in chat can give me the name. But they're one player who has done very well consistently. I mean, do you actually think this deck is good after Nadu and Grief are banned? And be honest with me, because players want to know if they should be registering this deck for the weekend for their RCQs. Would Alex Hayne play this deck?
I mean, I think it's pretty good. It's really the thing is when you're registering a deck like Storm, you kind of want to play it when people don't think it's good, because then there's going to be fewer number of hate cards. I think the number of hate cards really influences whether or not it's a good choice to play the deck. And usually you're one of the best game 1 decks in the format. Nadu being gone as the other deck that can win really quickly is good for you, and Grief being gone as the best interaction sort of is also good for you. So I wouldn't be surprised that if Storm starts being one of the decks to beat, which then leads to being a little bit worse because people have sideboards full of hate cards.
Okay, just like in Legacy, Storm is it's like very good at getting through a lot of hate. I don't know if the same applies for the Ruby variant in Modern. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not as good as the Legacy build. Depends on what the hate cards are.
Okay.
The way the Ruby Storm deck works is it uses a lot of cards like we just saw Glimpse, the Impossible. There's Reckless Impulse and Ren's Resolve. And those cards, don't actually draw cards, right? But they put cards into exile. And so things that prevent you from being able to cast cards from exile are really brutal because they stop you from digging for your answer to their hate card. Whereas in Legacy, let's say you have Ponder, Brainstorm, those cards can find you the answers to whatever hate card you're fighting in.
All right, so getting back into the match here, it looks like we had a Ruby Medallion on turn 2. Interestingly enough, that Ruby Medallion is now in the graveyard thanks to Flame of Anor. And this is a card that I personally have never seen in a Storm build, but I'll also admit that I am not the most versed when it comes to the intricacies of Ruby Storm. What the heck is this Flame of Anor doing in this deck list?
Well, Kanister is a mad genius, and so he's decided he's forced to play a blue splash instead of a green splash. Well, he's going to main deck Flame of Anor over a couple of copies of Glimpse, and that generally makes your Goldfish a little slower, but does give you better ability to interact, especially with hate cards post board, which are almost always creatures or artifacts, which the Flame can answer. And then we also got to see here in game 1 that it was able to kill a Ruby Medallion, which otherwise the Storm deck doesn't have a way of interacting with, and basically prevented Dingo from storming off. And we're actually on a very late Storm turn where Dingo has 4 lands in play. I have basically almost never seen a game one in all my testing or games of Storm where a player managed to get four lands into play.
Yeah, that's actually kind of crazy because you said like turn 2 on both sides, but here we are just casually. All right, I'm just gonna play, you know, Reckless Impulse, and I've got my Ruby Medallion, and I'm gonna try and set up here. So quite an anomaly of a game here. And also, I'm gonna just catch up on what I said earlier. Shout out to Xenoone, that is the Magic Online player who has been crushing with this deck. If you want to see their deck list, be sure to check it out on mtgo.com. If you're looking for these specific deck lists, I mean, you already know where to go. That's going to be moxville.com/mtgo. Do we have a kill here from either side in the next turn or two?
Well, Kanister's pretty close to a kill because having a cost producer is a big, really important thing when you're trying to kill. So this Desperate Ritual basically represents 3 mana. The treasure represents another mana. So Kanister has up to 4 mana, can cast Past in Flames, play this Desperate Ritual again. I think if Kanister had yet another ritual, then he would be able to go off here, but instead cast the Flame to draw 2 cards, and it's Dingo's chance.
Okay, let's see. Dingo, do you have it? Mountain, Past in Flames, Wish, Ren's Resolve, and Manamorphose all in play. We're going to kick it off with a Manamorphose, and I'm going to guess that it really just depends what the Ren Resolves flips here.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, Dingo's not going to be able to go off this turn. You really need a cost reducer, or you need a bunch of rituals to build the Past in Flames back to go off, and Dingo doesn't have either of those. Interesting decision early in the game when he had a Ruby Medallion. He surveilled a Ral to the graveyard, and then Cancer happened to have the answer that's Ruby. So he's kind of been punished for that decision. Whether or not it was right is another thing, but it's just interesting to look and see.
All right, looks like we just cast Wish here. Wish is kind of interesting. And oh, okay, Wish for a Braid. And now it looks like both players are sort of assuming the control role here. But Kanister picks up another copy of Ruby Medallion. And I'm going to be honest with you, Storm has never been my forte. Listen, counting to 10 is hard already. Counting to 20 is even harder. So, like, do we have something here?
In this deck, you often are kind of going off a lot when you're going off. It's not like counting to 10 or 20 as much. It's way more about, if you have a graveyard full of spells and can Pass in Flames them, you can basically draw your whole deck and cast every spell. However, Kanister's kind of in the same spot he was last turn, where he has Ruby Medallion plus 2 mana available, which isn't enough to go off. Unless he had another card in the graveyard, but it doesn't look like it. So it'll be interesting to see what he does here. Possibly is something that he could wish for, the sideboard. Then,
Well, I mean, he's going for it. I mean, putting Past in Flames on the stack is kind of a big commitment here. Flashback the Desperate Ritual. We have a Strike It Rich or 2. Actually, color me. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. We flopped over Ral and we flopped over another Past in Flames. Now, is that enough to do anything, or are we just going to keep our, use a quote unquote another setup turn here, just leave the Ral in play and sort of go along our way?
It's interesting. The Ral also makes the Wish cost 1 less mana, and then the Strike It Riches are cost 1 to flashback from the Past in Flames rather than their natural flashback. So they break even on mana. The Storm counts at 7, but 2 of those spells are non-instants and sorceries in the Ruby and the Ral. With Ral, the magic number is 6. You want to be able to flip it once you've cast 6 instants or sorceries. Then you can ultimate it, and you usually will win from that point. So Kanister's kind of got a couple coin flips in his future.
All right, well, here's another one. Are we going to be able to strike it rich with this Ral? Heads or tails? Do you play the game, or do you just tails never fails? Heads is
heads. It's looking good for if you're on Team Kanister here. Ultimating a Ral, a lot of spells, and there's already a Past in Flames and a Wish in hand.
Do you say this is pretty locked up then?
I mean, we don't see what spells right now were hit from the Ral Ultimate, but now we can, and Yeah, I suspect that at this point it's academic.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious here because you know, in Legacy, the lines are very cut and dry. You know, you go Infernal Tutor, crack your lines, I diamond, get past in flames, flash it back, do all the cool stuff. In Modern, I feel like kind of like what we saw on that turn where Dingo went like desperate ritual into glimpse the unthinkable. That the games are not necessarily always set in stone. You know, you can fizzle. Like you even mentioned it in your story, right? So how often would you say that this deck fizzles in from these sort of positions? Is it something that you know you'd have to be very wary of and calculate?
It doesn't fizzle that much when you're really going off. It's the danger is more when you're kind of lower on resources. Like when Kanister first tried to go off, right? He basically realized he decided, okay, I can't let Dingo have another turn, right? And he went for the ritual Past in Flames into uh, Impulse or Ren's Resolve, I forget which one it was, which then hit Ral plus to be able to finish off from there and flip the Ral. There, if let's say that Ren's Resolve had hit like land or Ruby land or something like that, um, the combo turn would have ended, and kind of all those resources he put into it, right? You would have had to pass the turn to Dingo. Um, what in the spots where you just have cast a bunch of spells, you kind of have a lot of raw. You get to see so many cards that you don't really fizzle.
Okay.
I'd say like the point is once you have like 3 Ren's resolves and like a way to flash them back, you're gonna see everything.
Well, I looked at Kanister's opening hand. It had triple Ruby Medallion, but didn't have a second land here. And now, moments later, he's on a mulligan down to 5, putting back a Flusterstorm. The hand is a bunch of rituals and a medallion, which seems pretty good, putting yourself in a position to top deck. And that's the wish.
Yeah, I mean, Desperate Ritual is also one of the better ones, though. When you're a little low on resources to start, it's worse. But if, let's say, Kanister gets to a point where he has 3 lands in play after untapping with a Ruby, you can play Desperate Ritual, splice it, which gets you for 3 mana, gets you up to 6 mana. You can play the other ritual, gets you up to 8 mana. That's a lot of mana. And then, depending, what else you have to go with it, Wish can potentially be good. But usually you want like some way to draw a bunch of cards, but you'll have all the mana you need.
Okay. Turn 2 Ruby Medallion following a Thundering Falls that surveils a wish to the top. So, you know, Dingo not killing on turn 2. Kanister gets to breathe a little sigh of relief here. But Kanister's hand looks kind of like redonkulous for a mulligan to 5. I'm just going to be honest with you. And this sort of goes in hand with what you were saying this matchup is about. We didn't really see this in game 1, which is just like kill your opponent, man. Like, you know, just
Yeah.
do the broken thing, because this is not a matchup where, you know, both players are usually interacting. It's funny because, you know, last match we saw Wish to kill the Ruby Medallion and then Flame of Anor, and I sound like a, you know, a little goofball here, but trust me. And if you don't trust me, trust the Pro Tour champion. How about that?
Well, there's some interaction, right? We see there are, especially post board, there's a little bit more, but mostly, your deck is full of card draw, rituals, and enablers. You can't have that much interaction, or when you try and go off, you're going to fizzle. Kanister just doing a sideboard check to see if he had the play potentially playing Desperate Ritual, then playing Ruby Medallion, then playing Desperate Ritual, and if Wish could find something better than what he had, he probably could go off, which is kind of what the turn 2 combo looks like. Turn 3 is much more common, but when you're on the draw, you often try to go turn 2 because chance of you dying on your third turn is pretty high.
Okay, that was a little bit dicey. I didn't see like mana generation from Dingo's side, and it seems like right now at the pace that we're playing cards, I don't know if we necessarily have something figured out yet. We're just like playing our spells in a certain sequence. There was a certain sequence. There was the Pyretic Ritual that we hit off of the Ren's Resolve that lets us put Ral Monsoon's Mage into play while also having 1 mana floating. I think the other, okay, yeah, so the other Ral, so the other Ren, it's a glimpse, but and then the Ral flips, but not at 6.
Yeah, though this is one thing that you do sometimes do in these spots where you're not going to go off this turn. You get Ral to 7, and you could plus it so that it's threatening to go next turn without having to put any spells into it, right? So right now Kanister really has to do something. Can't pass the turn to Dingo and let's Ral ultimate. Ral's
Okay,
an
yeah.
interesting card. One of the things you want to do is you want to get as many. It doesn't care when the coin flip happens, like how many spells have been cast when that trigger first went on the stack. It only cares when the trigger resolves. So you want to put as many spells on the stack so that your triggers resolve once at least 6 spells have been cast, which often means like you're casting your last couple spells in response to each other.
Ooh,
To give
okay.
you more chances.
That's pretty fascinating. Well, we have Wish. We have 2 ruby medallions. What are we going to be wishing for?
We got lots of mana. All the mana Kanister really would want.
There's Past in Flames. So we'll just do it all again.
Yeah.
Wait, does Kanister just win here?
Well, I don't think so because what is he going to wish for now with this flashback wish? Well, found a reckless impulse, which actually found Ral and another Manamorphose. So yeah, I think Kanister is going to win here.
Wow. Wow. See, this is what I'm talking about, where it's like these games, they don't really feel deterministic. Like on one hand, you could, you know, impulse into something insane like the Ral and the and Dingo's just gonna scoop her. You could, like, flip over the Ral, you could flip over the Manamorphose, and then other instances like you saw on Dingo's side, well, maybe you just don't get to fully combo off. Maybe you're just like one spell short.